So we are very excited. We just received the scores yesterday afternoon, so we're definitely in the process right now of disaggregating the data, and that takes quite a lot of time to do a really in-depth analysis. So we think we have lots of things to celebrate at this point. We have some schools with some really impressive gains in language arts. Cherry Street, Northside, Petronas, St. Andrew, we're really proud of them. West Bay, we're out here today at West Bay. Beach Elementary, Deer Point, Bozeman, and Rosenwald High School really have some great gains in ELA. So we're celebrating for them. We're also celebrating some great math gains at Cherry Street and St. Andrew again, and West Bay, Deer Point, Waller, Beach, Breakfast Point. So there are lots of things, good things going on at those schools. So we're celebrating those. Looking at Arnold, there was an 18% increase in passing scores on the geometry EOC. So that's very exciting. We're really digging into that data. Overall on science, our students in 5th grade increased 6 percentage points from last year, up to 54% of our students scoring a 3 or above, so we're celebrating that. In 8th grade, we're up 2 percentage points from last year. On U.S. history, Rosenwald students saw a 32% point increase of students scoring 3 and above, which is huge, so we're really proud of that. In civics, we had 76% of our students scoring a level 3 or higher. So that's just some surface numbers. Obviously, there's a lot more work to be done digging into and disaggregating the data. So we anticipate rolling out more news next week as that work continues.
And when do you anticipate getting the overall school grades, like the A through F?
That's up to the state to release those. So they had until June 30th to release these scores. So we're a little ahead of schedule from them. So we're certainly grateful for that. So that'll be up to them to release those school grades. We don't have any information about that yet at this time.
Why do you think there have been these increases?
I think that we're getting smarter, working smarter, and hopefully not harder about looking at the benchmark testing that we do with our students. So that's one of the things that we're looking at right now with these test scores. How do these final test scores correlate against the benchmark testing that's been going on all year? Were the teacher-given assessments and the benchmark testing able to identify the struggling students early enough for interventions to take place? Back when I was in school, the teacher just taught the book, and everybody did the book, and everybody took the same test. And now our teachers are disaggregating the data down to the level that they may have 25 students in a class, and perhaps for that math lesson, they have 6 individual math lessons going on, and sometimes even more, trying to individualize that instruction to make sure the struggling students get what they need, and the students who already mastered this material get what they need. So it's so much more complicated. And the other thing I think we have to remember when we're looking at these scores is that our teachers work far too hard during the course of the year to have that summed up in one test score. This is a snapshot of what's going on in our schools and our classrooms, and it's an interesting little snapshot, and it's something to consider. But our teachers are pouring their hearts and souls into these kids every day, and a well-rounded education is more than just how a student performs on a standardized test. So we're looking at the whole picture and the whole child, and this is a piece of that. It's an important piece of that, but it's not really, is that child educated? It's a piece of that puzzle. So it's an important piece of the puzzle. We do not understand that, but it's not everything.
How did Bay County do compared to the whole state?
Well, that's something we're looking at right now, comparing our scores against the other districts like ourselves, and then against the state. So there are places where we're slightly above, places where we're slightly below, and then again, we're looking at districts like us. One of the things that you definitely have to take into consideration are the number of Title I schools in our district. That continues to grow, and Title I students certainly are as capable of learning as anybody else, but they sometimes face some challenges that make learning a little difficult. Mobility rate can be certainly a challenge. If a student has attended 3 different schools in 1 year, that's certainly going to be a challenge when it comes to their learning. On this particular test day, did it catch some students that were living in stable situations on that day? It probably did. Did it catch some students that might have been removed to foster care the day before? I bet it did. Did it catch some students who just found out that they were going to be homeless? I bet it did. Does that impact their test score? It absolutely does. So there are lots of things that have to be taken into consideration when comparing things. You're not necessarily comparing apples to apples when you're looking at school A to school B in our own district. And again, you're not looking at that apples to apples when you're comparing District A to District B, because districts are facing different challenges with their students.
What are some of the ways that the school district uses the information and that these tests find, and also how do teachers use this information?
So I think one of the things I mentioned earlier is it's very important for us to look at our benchmark testing data and our classroom assessment data and compare that against the students' performance on the test. Were we able to identify the struggling students early enough to pour in the interventions? Did our benchmark testing and our teacher-given assessments identify for us where students were struggling, where they needed assistance in order to provide that before the test? So we definitely use this data to look for that correlation. I kind of look at this testing data on a very simple level. When I was in the classroom, I would work with my students on something I called light bulbs and smiley faces. So smiley faces were things that we did well, you've nailed it, that's amazing. And the light bulb was something that, we're still struggling with that, we need to work on this to find that light bulb moment. So for some of our schools, some of our teachers, this testing information is, wow, it's a light bulb moment. What can we learn from this? What can we grow? What can we alter? What can we adapt? We certainly look at the situations where we find the teachers that seem to have found their lane and this is really working for them, and you seem to have it all kind of rocking. How can we learn from that? How can we replicate what you're doing in other situations? But again, every classroom is different. Every teacher is facing different challenges with her students or his students, so it's not just a matter of picking this up and sticking it in a new classroom.
Were there any areas students in Bay County did really well in compared to last year and not as well in?
Well, those were the ones I just kind of outlined on the surface. That's as far as we are yet. Like I said, people are breaking out the data right now and making multiple spreadsheets, and we should have lots more information on Monday.